Hi there, I'm Brooke Dibley from Simply Speaking SLT, and welcome to my tutorial for my open-ended editable book companion for any book. So whether or not you choose to print this and use it, whether you want to use it on your iPad or whether you're going to use it in Teletherapy, we all need to start in Adobe Acrobat Reader to add story information for the books that we want to create book companions for. You can use this document to create an unlimited amount of book companions simply by adding each book's information into the first 3 pages of this document, autofilling the document and making sure you save it as a new file. So what we need to do first is orient ourselves to this document. So I have this open in Adobe Acrobat Reader, like I said before, and Adobe Acrobat Reader is free on Mac and Windows to use this way, so please do make sure you're using Adobe Acrobat Reader. And it will look like this, or you may have some other boxes showing up. If you would like your document to look like mine, where it's a bit cleaner, especially if you're doing Teletherapy, you may want to do this. All you need to do is go up to Edit, go to Preferences, and then where it says Forms, make sure that your settings look like mine, that this is unticked and these are unticked. And it'll just make all the form fields clean and not show up so that this document appears more to be like an app. Okay, and so on the first page you're going to notice the symbol here and this blank space here. We'll come back up to here in a moment, but first let's orient ourselves to these buttons over here. If we hit this, we'll go to our terms of use area. Please note that this document is under copyright. You have bought a license for one user unless otherwise stated on your purchase order. So please do be sure to not share this with other people. If other people would like a copy, please send them to the listing in my store where they can get their own. The tutorials are under this button, and you can click here for using on a computer, here for using it on an iPad, and if you are using my no print version, which will go over, sorry, my printable version, which we'll look at here, the printable version looks the same on the front page because the assumption is you're not going to print this front page. And if we go here, the tutorial just looks like this for those of you who will be printing your activity here. So the printable looks very black and white. The no print version, as we're looking at here, is still quite black and white, but does have a lot more use of black and some color throughout the document. Okay, so first what we need to do is add our story information. So because we're making a new companion here, we need to save it under our new story name. So we're going to go File, Save As, and then you're going to choose to name it. So I've put this in the Pig the Pug folder because that's what I am going to, which book I'm going to do for this tutorial. But go ahead and save this in a new place under the new name of your book so that you'll always be able to find the companion that relates to the story you're doing and still have the original blank copy. If you do accidentally copy over this with book information without keeping a blank copy, go ahead and re-download this from Teachers Pay Teachers. Okay, so as you can see, we insert images into this document as well as words. That's what the icon here represents, is adding images. And so before I went in to edit this book companion, I've taken photos from the story. So as you can see here, we'll look at this one. So I took photos of the story pages of the items I want my students to describe. I've taken a photo of 10 because this document allows up to 10, but if you only have 5 or 6, that doesn't matter. And then I've taken photos of what the 6 steps I believe represent the sequence of the story. But then as you can see, I've also done this for this story, and these are all screenshots from this story here, which I have been reading on Epic. So this is an ebook that I read with my students on my iPad or in Teletherapy on the computer, and all I did was I found the pages in the book, and then I used my screen clipping program that comes with my computer or any kind of screenshot software that you have on your computer to screenshot the parts of the book that I think best represent what I want. So I've got my items that I want my students to describe down here and my sequence of the story up here. So you need to take 6 pictures of the sequence of the story from the book, and you need to take up to 10 pictures of items from the story that you believe best represent the sequence. And then you also need a picture of the cover. Okay, so if we type here, we can put in the name of the book. I like to use capitals for this part because it's better formatted. Pig the Pug. And then I can go and I can find the cover of this story. If I go to where I've saved it, and there we go. We've now got the front page looking like I need it to, so I know that this is for that book. And then if I go to add story info, you'll see Pig the Pug is already added as the story title, and the cover's already down here for the parts of the story. So that's awesome. Now on these next 3 pages is where you'll add relevant information from the story. Here you type in the sequence of the story. Now if there are less than 6 sequences in the story, 6 main events, and you only would fill in up to 4 or 3, as many as you can, just leave blank what doesn't count. And then same with your images. This is where you will insert your images. So I'm going to go ahead and type in the key parts of the story and then bring you back to show you how I'm going to put in these images. Okay, so I've added in the key parts of the story here. Now, as you can see down the bottom for this page, it says this info is used for sequencing and story retell activities. So now that I've put in this information here in order, let's see what happens. If I go home, I go to the menu button and I choose sequencing, and I'm going to choose words, because we've typed in words, 6 parts words. Here you can see they're all out of order. And then our students will type a number up here, 1, 2, or 3, to put the story back in order. So let's go back home and add in more information. Now, let's add in the images. So this is for our students that may not be able to sequence written information. It may be too complex for them, and it's better for them to sequence some visual information. So I'm going to go here, click, and then go browse, and choose what I believe best represents the first part of the story. I've just taken photos of the pages. So I've taken photos of the pages and then sent them to myself on Gmail using my Gmail internet account, email account, sorry. Now, to ensure that all your images are going to be around the right way, like they are here, you need to make sure that they are wider than they are high, so that they're a portrait kind of, no, landscape kind of image. So how I do that is just turn your phone sideways as you would to take a normal photo. And then you can always crop it if you want to crop in on something, but that will always mean that it's wider than it is high. It will automatically orient that way, so that if you do have square images, it's going to flip them over. So just to be aware of that. So this image here is kind of perfect because this image here is very long. However, these I wanted to zoom in a bit more, so they are still a little bit wider than they are high, but they're close to square. Okay, so now we've done this first page. Let's have a look now. If we go to the menu and we go sequencing, pictures, 6 parts. And there they are, all of our pictures. They're not in the right order, but if you were printing this, you could cut these cards out if you wanted your students to physically sequence them. Most of my students just write up the top the numbers in these little areas here if we are printing it. But there we go, that's how that works. And then for the story retell area, if we go to the menu and then we go story retell with pictures, they're all going to be in the correct order. So these are all in the correct order of the story, and this will help your students to retell the story if they need pictures to help them. However, as you can see from the other options here, you can also retell through drawing, and then you can use your annotation tools to draw, especially if you're on an iPad, or if you're doing printable, they can draw with markers. And then if we go back, retell through typing, your students can retell the story here, and these tick boxes can help them tick off whether they've included the beginning, the middle, the end, and all those kind of areas. Okay, so let's go back to add our story information. So we've done page 1. Page 2, our WH questions. So I'm not going to add these in here because I actually prefer to target blanks levels of questioning. So I've added these in here because I know a lot of you have IEP goals that are organized by this version of questions, and so if you type them in here, they will automatically show up throughout the document. And then I will add in my inference questions in just a moment, but I want to show you the blank stuff. So if we go home and then we go menu, blanks levels of questioning, here is some information about blanks levels of questioning. If you want more information, you can click here. It's a very evidence-based way of targeting questions. And then if we go to level 1, we've got all the different types of questions under level 1. And what I like to do is have this open or printed while I'm reading the story with the child, and we can always ask these questions during the story or use the story afterwards to go back and answer these kind of questions. And there's an area here where you can type in their response, or if you just want to do the accuracy, you might put a 1 for accurate or a 0 for inaccurate. And then I've got all the levels in here, level 2, level 3, level 4 here. So level 3 is 2 pages and level 4 is 2 pages. So and then the WH questions, your questions will show up in these boxes, whatever you type up on that top page. So if you do want to look more at the blanks levels, do go ahead and look at that part of this document. Let's go to add story information. We'll go to the next page. So whatever you type in here will be showing up in those boxes. I'm going to go ahead and put in my inference questions and then come back to you. Okay, so I've added in my information, and now if I go home to the menu area and I go to inference and I hit go, here is our questions up here, and then our students can type the answers in here, or if you're printing they could write them in. Otherwise you could just ask the questions and note down whether or not they were accurate in these areas. Okay, and then we go back to add our story information, and in here we also can add some nouns in from the story that we would like our students to describe. So I'm going to go ahead and type them in here, and also add in the images that I've got from the book exactly the same way as we did for the sequencing, and then I'll come back to you. Okay, so I've added in the images that I'd like my students to describe. That's for those that can't read or may just do better with describing what they can see. And then I've also got my words for those of them who can read and I want a little bit more of a complex activity for them. And then over here, we're going to insert our compare and contrast items. So we might have them compare and contrast these items we've already talked about above, or we may have them compare and contrast something from the story with something else. So you put them on top of each other. So if I want them to do compare a dog food bowl with a cereal bowl, then I will just type them on top of each other and they'll show up in the document. So I'm going to go ahead and fill those all in and then bring you back. Okay, now those are done. Let's have a look at what they look like across the document. So if I go home and then I go to the menu and we have a look at describing, and we first go pictures, we can see my items has been added in here, and I can hit the arrow and the next one will show up. And then if we go home again and then we go to describing and we go words, there is my words there that I typed in. Okay, so we'll also look at our compare and contrast. So we've got our dog food bowl with our cereal bowl, and if I click here we can type in some differences, and same in the middle and on the other side. So that's if you're using this no print. If you're doing the printable version, you'll print it off and your students can either just talk about how they're the same and different, or you can write on this sheet depending on how you choose to print them, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So now we're going to go back to the home area and add our story information area, and we've got the first page filled in and the second page filled in now, and finally we have the third page. So on this line here, we're going to insert vocabulary words that we would like our students to have to work through. Regular verbs in the present tense with ing on the end, we're going to put in here. Irregular verbs from the story. You might choose words that are related to the story if you can't find enough of them to fill in here. Or you can just leave blank the areas which don't apply. For example, if you only have 7 to work on, then you just leave the last 3 blank. And then speech sounds. So with the speech sounds, what I do is I put in here originally the sound I'm most likely going to use the book for. So this book, Pig the Pug, I use G for the G sound, that G, back as a back sound, and I will pop in G words. But then if I want to use this with another student, I'll quickly come in and just change the 10 words here, or the student can do that with me. Let me show you what I mean. If we go menu and then we go to speech sounds, find and say area, we could instead just fill this in together as a student and we can find the words in the story that have our speech sounds in it and fill it in here, and as we fill it in here, it will fill in the other activities across the document. So I actually might leave that blank for today, and then my student and I can work together to find the words that have their sound in it, and I do often do that, and it makes it a bit more versatile, but that's because I use this in a no print way. If you're wanting to print this, you should add in the speech sounds here that you want to target for the story, and then save a new version with every new set of speech sounds you want to work on. Okay, so I'm going to go fill in this information and then I'll come back and explain this bottom area to you. I've now filled in the information from the story. I wasn't able to add one here, but I will fix that before I upload this into TPT, and you will be able to add one there. And we'll take a look at what's happened in the document. So if we go home, we go to the menu and we go to the vocabulary area, we will see that our word is up here and we can analyze the word down here. This is an evidence-based approach to learning new words. Is the definition, finding it in context, and then writing your own sentence. And then I've got other areas here which just help build our understanding of a word. And then if we look again, we've now got the verb tense area. If we go to the irregular area, it looks the same as this is the regular area and this is the irregular area. We've got our present tense verbs. Oh, that's meant to be making. And it doesn't matter if I change it here or anywhere in the document, it will automatically update in all the other areas where we use this word. So we write over here past tense and over here future tense. And I've purposely used different things like last week, last month, yesterday, last year, because studies have shown that kids learn better when we don't just say yesterday, when we use a variety of time frames for past tense verbs. And when we type in here, it is blue for the before and green for the after. Okay. So now if we go back again, have a look what's happened for our making sentences. Oh, no, not that one, sorry. Speech sounds. So I have added in these words for today just to show you how these games fill in, but I often will just have my students do that themselves. And if we put here that the sound is G and that we're doing it in all areas, and then if we move down, what's happened is we now have this silly sentences activity all filled in with our words automatically. Automatically we have this game board and we've got the book here and the game is to put it back on the shelf. We've got our book here and we've got our bounce game and the instructions on how to play are here. Please note you will need a dice to play these games if you're doing Teletherapy. I have a free Teletherapy dice in my store which I will link down below this video. And we've got tic-tac-toe again, our book's in the middle, and our words have automatically been added on the tic-tac-toe boards. If you are doing Teletherapy, I will explain later how you play these games. And then we've got my terms of use. So now, if we go back to this activity here, home, we look back here at our third page. Okay, so you only fill in this table with people and characters, verbs, adjectives, and nouns from the book if you don't want your students to do it themselves in this activity here, the making sentences activity. I will often have my students do this with me, so we fill in the people and the characters in the story, and if there aren't 6 characters in the story, we think of some sort of related people. For example, we might have Pug's owner and talk about what his name would be. If there was another dog, what their name would be. And then the verbs in the story, which again, you've already talked about maybe if you're doing the verbs activity with your student. Adjectives from the story or related to the story. Same with objects and nouns. So I find related vocabulary, if they're not enough in the story, then we roll a dice. Again, if you're doing Teletherapy, you'll use my Teletherapy dice to create new sentences. And in no print, these text boxes are all editable. And in printable, you will just write them on there. This also works on the iPad, obviously, as well. So when we fill these in here, they will also automatically fill in on these top pages. And the same goes the other way around if you want to fill them in yourself, and then your students make their sentences. So if you're only working on subject-verb sentences, you'll just leave adjectives and nouns for that student, and you'll just fill in what's appropriate for them, then roll the dice and create your new sentences using the object and the verb that you have rolled. And that is how you fill in your information for the story, and then your document will automatically auto-populate, as we see over here. Let me pull this out. with all your content. So we've got sequencing of 3, sequencing of 4, 5, and 6. Again, so if you only had 3 parts to the story, if you only had a student that could sequence 3, just add 3 images and then do the 3 activity, which is all linked to on the menu pages. We've got different activities. This activity here is where your students will actually type it themselves, the beginning, middle, and end. So that's like another level of complexity, whereas the pictures are easier. The written is the next level of complexity, and then this is even more complex because the students have to type themselves in what happened in the story. And then we've got story retell again, like we've looked at already in this video. Story elements, which we didn't need to add any information on the top pages, but that's story elements where we fill those in for our students. They can either use this page or this page. And then we've got the blanks levels of questioning, which I've talked about, the WH questions, which I've talked about, inferencing, our describing here. Now, if you're printing this, I recommend that you print all of these 1 to a page, except your describing and your compare and contrast. Print all those pages 4 to a page, because if you do that, then they'll show up like task cards and you can quickly cut them out, unless you do want to have each one on a single page. But I like to have them as task cards, so I just open up this side area here, as you can see I'm doing, and I just hold down the shift key all the way down to the bottom here, and then all the way down to here. Then I hold control and select all of these, and then I just go right click print pages and then choose multiple. So if we hit multiple here, I could use 6 to a page if I want them really small, but I think I'll go 4 to a page. And then we can choose to print the page border, and then we've got task cards. And then the other areas I'd print as full page worksheets, just to show you that. And then for the board games, you'd use a dice and mouse. Vocabulary area we've got here, we've looked at the describing and the compare and contrast, and then we've got our verbs, which we've looked at, our sentences, making sentences, and our articulation activities. So that's how the document is organized, my terms of use at the bottom. Now we will move into how to use this for Teletherapy. If you are printing, go ahead and now print your document as I've shown you, using single pages for these worksheets and then multiples for your cards. And I also like to print these first 3 pages and put them in the front of the document, so I know which book we're working on and which elements we'll be targeting without me having to leaf my way through. The game companion, sometimes I will also print this 2 to a page, so that I just use less paper for my students that don't need as much room. Okay, so now if you're a teletherapist, keep watching. Let's talk about how to play these games in Teletherapy. We've looked at how to fill in the text boxes. If we go home, for example, we go to story retell through typing, you'll notice these symbols here. It's referring to what skill your students mostly need to have to be able to do that activity. So if we go back again in sequencing, for this, they just have to be able to recognize pictures. For this type of activity in this row, they have to be able to read. And for this activity, they mostly will need to type. So that's what these symbols mean. And they're also down in the bottom right-hand corner. Okay, so the menu page is where you can see all your activities. The story retell, quite self-explanatory. We've looked at that already. So all of these I've already talked about. Let's just show you for describing that these are tick boxes. I just wanted to point that out so you can have your students tick off as they do each activity. And then again, you're going to use this in Adobe Acrobat Reader for Teletherapy, and share your screen with your students so that they can then type as well, if you are able to give them mouse and keyboard controls. Otherwise they tell you the answers and then you type them in. Compare and contrast I've showed you, verb tense I've shown you, making sentences. With making sentences, you'll need the dice. So you will split screen my dice with this page, and I've shown you how to do that in the dice tutorial. However you open it in Excel, the dice opens in Excel, and you split screen. If you do not have Excel but you have PowerPoint, you may choose to use my number spinners, which are a paid product in my store, or you can use any random number generator that's online. There are a bunch of dice alternatives online. Your platform may even have one. And then for speech sounds, if we go to the board game, with a board game you need counters. So we've talked about the dice already, but what I do is I hit this yellow speech box over here which says comment, and then I get rid of that box there, and then I to add in a square, and I'll explain why in a moment. And we draw our square like this, or our rectangle, and then we can put the opacity down if we want to, and change the color up here. So if we do another one for my other student or for myself, if we're playing this 2-player obviously, then I might want to be green. I'll make that green. Okay, so the reason we do rectangles and we make sure they're always a little bit outside the box is because this is a text box, this entire area in here. So if we were to put our counter right down in the middle of here, it will go behind the text box because a form field is there, and that's just how it works, and we will lose our image, our game piece behind there. So we just play like this, and we roll our dice, which we've talked about already, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, if I rolled a 4, and then I put it back up there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 again, and then I need to say my words. You might choose to roll the dice again to see how many times you need to say your words, so on and so forth. So it doesn't matter what shape you use, just make sure that you always have some of the shape outside of the text box, because as you can see when I click inside here, it just gives me the ability to type. It's not going to let me put this up and inside there. Same goes for this activity. I've just copy pasted over those squares, and I'm just going to pop this one here and this one here. You can choose where you start on this activity and roll the dice and move your way around, and you decide together whether you're going to go anti-clockwise or clockwise, and every time you bounce over a book you get a point, and so you move around and around and around, and then you decide together, you can type on this line here how many points you have to get to win, and then we roll the dice again normally to see how many times we need to say our word that we land on. And then down here with tic-tac-toe, I use the writing tool, which can be found under here. So we'll do a circle, and then we might change the color if someone else is red, wants to be red or something, and we can so on and so forth. So I just write on top of it. I don't actually use shapes very much for this game, unless my students really can't write with their mouse, and then you can't change it, but it's fine because you've played your game. And then you can always just go Control Z to get rid of those. What I like to do is save a clean copy of my game companion before I play each time, and then when I play each time, of course we're annotating all through it, and it's that child's work, and so then I will open a clean one again for the next student. And so that is how you use the game companion. If you have any other book companion, sorry, if you have any questions, do reach out to me. If you go to the terms of use page, all of these buttons will take you to my social media. You can email me, Instagram me, Facebook message me, and I'll be able to respond to any of your questions. If you want to check out any of my other videos and tutorial videos, it's under there, my YouTube. I hope that you found this helpful, and have fun in speech. Remember, reduce the prep time and increase the fun.